My name is Lorraine Chambers. I'm 64 years old, and if someone told me a decade ago that I would one day sit alone in a quiet house in Fayetteville, Arkansas, replaying every decision I ever made as a mother, I would have laughed. Life wasn't supposed to turn out this way. I grew up believing in family, believing that the people you raise will stand beside you in the fire, not push you into it. But life teaches you truths at an age when you are too tired to fight back easily. Ever since my husband Jonathan passed away 6 years ago, the house has carried a different kind of silence, one that doesn't comfort, but suffocates. I used to talk to him when things got hard, whispering toward his empty recliner as if he could still hear me. But time changes things. Grief quiets down, but loneliness becomes louder. And somewhere in that noise, you start doubting your own worth. My days had become predictable. I woke up early, made myself weak coffee because strong coffee began upsetting my stomach, fed the stray cats that wandered near my porch, and then sat by the window watching the neighborhood kids run to school. I wondered if my children, Brandon and Tessa, ever remembered those mornings when I used to run around packing their lunches, braiding Tessa's hair, or ironing Brandon's shirts. I gave them everything I had, even when Jonathan and I struggled financially. And yet, here I was, at this age, unsure if my children even saw me as a person or just a responsibility they wanted to get over with. The air that morning felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeps through sweaters and memories. I wrapped the shawl Jonathan had gifted me on our last Christmas together. That shawl held warmth that didn't belong to fabric. It belonged to the man who had loved me fully. Without him, I felt like someone had cut the anchor rope from my boat, leaving me drifting without direction, surviving but not living. And in that drifting, I began noticing things, small things that mothers often pick up before anyone else does. Fewer calls, shorter visits, conversations that felt rehearsed, and the sudden, strange interest both my children took in asking about my paperwork, my bank details, and whether I felt safe living alone at this age. I ignored the signs at first. A mother's heart always tries to explain the pain away. They are just worried, I told myself. They want to make sure I'm okay. But deep down, a quiet fear had started growing, a fear I didn't want to face. Something felt off, something felt wrong, but I kept brushing it away. After all, what mother wants to admit that her own children might see her not as someone to care for, but as someone to control? That morning, as sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds and the clock ticked louder than usual, I felt a shift inside me, a warning, a whisper, a tremor in my chest. Something was coming, something I wasn't prepared to face. And the worst part, it was coming from the very people I once held in my arms. My routine after Jonathan passed was simple but grounding. I'd get ready, put on light makeup, nothing more than a little foundation and a soft pink lipstick, and then walk down to the thrift store about 6 blocks from home. Working there wasn't for the money, it was for the company. The old wooden floors creaked under every step, and the scent of donated books mixed with fabric softener gave the place a comforting familiarity. People walked in with stories, with memories they were ready to let go of, and I liked listening. It made me feel less alone, somehow. My coworkers often told me I had the gentlest smile, something Jonathan always complimented too. Maybe that's why I stayed there. I liked feeling like myself again, even if just for a few hours. After work, I returned home around 2 p.m., made a small meal, usually soup or grilled cheese, and then sat on the couch where the afternoon sun warmed the cushions. Sometimes, if the loneliness crawled too close, I'd knit or read old recipe books to distract myself. Brandon and Tessa visited, but the warmth in their visits had faded. Brandon always walked in talking about his business stress, and Tessa often complained about her rent, her job, her life, everything except asking how I felt. At first, I believed they were just overwhelmed adults. Every generation carries its own burdens. But slowly, their tone shifted. They'd look around the house in ways that didn't feel like nostalgia, but assessment, like evaluating space, belongings, value. They started asking strange questions. Mom, do you ever feel confused about things? Do you still pay your bills on time? Have you thought about what would happen to the house in the future? I'd laugh nervously, saying, I'm not that old. But they never laughed back. The hardest part was how quickly they dismissed my feelings. If I said I was tired, Tessa would respond, see, that's why living alone isn't safe. If I said I missed Jonathan, Brandon would say, Mom, we can't keep worrying about you like this. Worrying? They never called unless they needed something. Their concern felt staged, and I felt guilty for even thinking that. But as the weeks passed, the emotional distance went from faint to undeniable. They were treating me differently, like I was fragile, incapable, almost inconvenient. And that realization hurt more than any physical pain. It felt like being erased slowly, like I was fading out of their world while still standing in front of them. One afternoon, after they left abruptly, I sat alone on the couch, staring at the door they had walked out of. Something inside me tightened, a strange mix of fear and intuition. I whispered to myself, Lorraine, they're planning something. But even then, I wasn't ready to believe that my own children could betray me. I wanted to trust them. I wanted to believe love was enough. But love wasn't enough. Brandon, my eldest, was always the strong-headed one. As a child, he questioned every rule, every limitation, every no. Tessa, on the other hand, was my gentle girl, clingy, emotional, always wanting hugs and bedtime stories. As adults, they had changed in ways I didn't recognize. Brandon had grown colder, always calculating, always speaking in clipped sentences, as if warmth was a waste of time. Tessa had grown anxious, impatient, and always juggling stress, but never accountability. Still, they were mine. And mothers forgive more than they should. Their visits had taken a strange pattern. They no longer arrived together. Instead, they came separately, whispering more than talking. Brandon would walk around the house slowly, looking at walls, pipes, roof corners, like an inspector. When I'd ask what he was doing, he'd say, just checking things, Mom. I didn't have the courage to question him further. Tessa's conversations grew repetitive. She kept bringing up senior communities, assisted living, places where Mom won't be alone. I brushed it off each time, telling her I'm perfectly capable. But she didn't look convinced. She looked determined. One evening, the air felt unusually but heavy. Brandon had come over unexpectedly. He checked under the sink, asked where I kept the insurance papers, and then casually said, Tessa and I think it's time you stop handling things alone. The way he said stop didn't sound like concern. It sounded like command. I remember feeling a strange ache spreading across my chest, not physical, but emotional. Were they losing faith in me? Or was something else happening? Tessa visited 2 days later. She sat close, held my hand gently, and said, Mom, you know we love you, right? When someone begins with that sentence, the ending is never good. She continued, We're only trying to protect you. Things happen fast at this age. We don't want you making mistakes. Mistakes? I'd built their entire childhood on discipline, responsibility, and love. And now they were treating me like a child. The shift was undeniable. My role was being rewritten, not as their mother, but as someone incapable, someone needing management, someone becoming an obstacle. For the first time in my life, I felt a cold worry in my spine. Something was happening behind my back, something that made them look at me not as Lorraine the mother, but as Lorraine the liability. I wanted to confront them, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if this was just their clumsy way of caring? I couldn't bear the thought of accusing my children, so I stayed silent. But silence doesn't save you. It only delays what's coming. And what was coming would shatter me. It was a Tuesday morning, unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel watched even when no one is there. I had stepped out to bring in a package from the porch when I heard faint voices near the side of the house, voices I recognized immediately. Brandon and Tessa. They hadn't told me they were visiting, yet there they were, standing beside the window outside my kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. I froze, hidden behind the screen door. Brandon said, "We have to do this before she complicates things. The bank won't wait forever." Tessa replied, "I know, but what if she finds out? She's not as naive as you think." Brandon's answer cut through me. "She doesn't need to know. It's for her own good. And for us." My hands trembled around the package. My throat tightened so fast I felt I couldn't breathe. What bank? What paperwork? Why before she complicates things? And why were my children talking about me like I was some obstacle in a business deal? I stepped back, afraid they'd hear my pounding heartbeat. They continued talking, their voices sharp, urgent. Brandon said, "Once the transfer goes through, we can move forward. The house is too big for her, and it's better if we use the equity now." Tessa whispered, "I just don't want Mom to freak out." Brandon replied, "She'll accept it. She has no choice." That was the sentence that sliced through my soul. No choice. I had never felt so humiliated, so blindsided. I wasn't dying. I wasn't losing my memory. I wasn't incapable. But they had already decided my life for me. I stepped quietly back into the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I kept hearing Brandon's voice echo. "She doesn't need to know." The betrayal felt raw, like someone had taken a knife to my trust. I remembered carrying Brandon in my arms when he was 2, singing to Tessa when she had nightmares, staying up late sewing costumes for school plays, cooking their favorite meals. I remembered their laughter, their hugs, their tiny hands in mine. Now those hands were preparing to take away everything I owned. Tears streamed down into my face, hot and uncontrollable. I wiped them away quickly when I heard the front door open. Tessa peeked inside and said, "Mom, you here?" I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice not to crack and expose what I knew. They both walked in casually, pretending nothing had happened. Brandon gave me a forced smile. "Hey, Mom. Thought we'd stop by." I looked at them and felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not of losing them, but of what they were capable of doing behind my back. That was the moment I realized. They weren't worried about me. They were preparing to take control of me, and I wasn't ready to face the storm they had already set in motion. The truth revealed itself the next morning, not through a confrontation, but through something far more painful: carelessness. Brandon always carried a navy blue backpack, the same one he used when he came straight from meetings. After their surprise visit the previous day, he left in a hurry and forgot to zip it properly. When I went to tidy up the living room, the backpack had fallen sideways, and a stack of papers had slipped out, scattered across the rug. I knelt down slowly, intending only to gather them neatly. But then my eyes caught something: my name. In bold letters, on multiple pages. My heartbeat surged. I picked up the papers with trembling fingers. The first page read, "Application for financial guardianship, proposed ward, Lorraine Chambers." My vision blurred. I blinked hard, forcing myself to read again. The document claimed I was struggling to manage financial responsibilities due to age-related cognitive decline. A lie. A complete, heartless lie. Behind it was another set of papers. Property transfer authorization, with Brandon's name listed as primary controller. And then another, notes about assisted living facilities, estimated house sale values, bank account access forms. There were signatures, copies, not originals. Someone preparing to forge, to file, to move forward without me. My breath turned shallow. I pressed my palm against the floor to steady myself. My children, my own children, were building a plan to take my home, my money, my independence, everything. And they were doing it quietly, behind closed doors, whispering like conspirators. I clutched the papers to my chest and felt something inside me crumble. The betrayal was not just in what they were doing, it was in how little they thought of me. They believed I was weak, powerless, someone who would simply accept whatever decision they made. Tears began falling, heavy and relentless. I sat on the rug, my body shaking. Memories flooded my mind. Brandon's first apartment, which I helped pay for. Tessa's college tuition, which I covered by working double shifts. The nights I stayed awake, sewing clothes, cooking meals, comforting fears. I gave them my youth, my strength, my love. And now they were preparing to trade me like a liability. I didn't hear Tessa walk in until she gasped softly, "Mom, what are you doing?" Her eyes darted to the papers in my hands, her expression tightening with panic. She rushed toward me, saying, "Mom, wait! This isn't what you think." I looked up at her with tears streaking my cheeks. "Then what is it, Tessa? Tell me what it is." My voice cracked, carrying years of exhaustion and fresh heartbreak. She stammered, "We were just preparing, just in case." "In case of what?" I whispered. "In case I lived too long." Her silence was my answer. At that moment, I felt something change inside me. Not anger, not hatred, but a fierce, painful clarity. They weren't protecting me. They were preparing to take over me. And I realized, with cold certainty, that my fight had just begun. That night, my bedroom felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I sat on the edge of my bed with Jack's old family journal on my lap. His handwriting, steady, kind, full of hope, made me feel both warm and shattered at the same time. He wasn't here anymore, and yet I felt like I was disappointing him by letting our children drift into something so dark. But the tears in my eyes weren't only for Jack. They were for Lucas. Morning came with a pale sunlight. I walked downstairs, my legs trembling but my mind firm. Lucas was already sitting in the living room sipping coffee. He didn't look guilty. He didn't even look worried. Just tired. "Mom, you look exhausted," he said with a forced smile. "We need to talk," I said, lowering myself into the armchair across from him. He set the mug down slowly. "If this is about the house again, it's about you forging my signature," I said plainly. His face went completely blank, the kind of blankness where someone's soul steps back and leaves only the body in the room. He stood up, walked toward the window, and pressed his forehead against the glass. "Mom, I had no choice," he whispered. "You don't see it. You forget things. You repeat stories. You thought I was weak." He turned around quickly. "No, I thought you needed help. I thought if I didn't act, something bad would happen." And the solution, I said, was to sell my home behind my back? He rubbed his hands over his face. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did. For the first time in months, I saw the little boy he used to be. The boy who hid in my lap during thunderstorms. The boy who believed my arms could protect him from anything. I softened, but only a little. Lucas, I said gently, I know you're under pressure. I know life hasn't been easy for you, but desperation doesn't give you permission to betray the people who love you. He sat down slowly, like the weight of everything was crushing him. Mom, I'm sorry, but apologies couldn't fix forged documents. They couldn't fix what he had tried to do. After that conversation, I went back upstairs and closed my door. I wasn't broken, just bruised. And bruises heal, but only if you stop the thing that caused them. I pulled out a notebook and listed everything I still had in my control. My medical records, my mental health tests, my financial power of attorney, my bank statements. Everything was valid. Everything was intact, which meant Lucas didn't have a legal leg to stand on. I looked in the mirror and whispered, Margaret Hale, you are not done yet. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just a grandmother. I wasn't just a widow. I was a woman who still had fight in her. My story wasn't over. And I would make sure I decided how it ended. The next morning, I drove myself to my longtime family attorney, Harold Grant. He'd been handling our legal matters since before Lucas was even born. When I walked into his office, he stood up immediately. Maggie, are you all right? I didn't try to sugarcoat anything. No, Harold, I need your help. We sat down in the conference room. The room smelled like paper and old books, comforting in a way that said, you're safe here. I told him everything, every detail. The forged documents, the shady builder, the false claim that I was losing memory, all of it. Harold listened with a seriousness I'd only seen twice before, once when Jack passed, and once when Lucas went through his first financial meltdown. Maggie, this is serious. Very serious, he finally said. But you did the right thing coming here. He examined my medical reports, my bank papers, and the official memory test results. When he saw everything was normal, he nodded. Good. Very good. First, we'll file a legal protection order. No one, family or not, will be able to sell, transfer, or manipulate your property without your direct consent. My breath shook with relief. Harold, I don't want to destroy Lucas's life. I just need to protect mine. And that's exactly what we'll do, he said. Then he checked my power of attorney. It was still in my name. Lucas hadn't managed to get his hands on it. You made the right choice trusting Brielle, he said softly. She's your anchor. Hearing that made my chest tighten, not out of pain, but pride. When the meeting ended, Harold said, You're protected now, Maggie. Nothing can happen without your approval. You're safe. Those words felt like someone had lifted a 1,000-pound weight off my shoulders. As I walked out, it began to rain. I stood under the small awning outside the building and watched the droplets fall. Was I too harsh? Was I becoming someone who feared her own son? Then a thought came quietly. I'm not standing against him. I'm standing for myself. Being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity. Sometimes strength means drawing boundaries, even with your own children. I got in my car, started the engine, and whispered, Jack, I hope I'm doing this right. And for the first time in a long time, I felt he would have been proud. When I reached home, Lucas was sitting in the living room, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He must have known I had gone to Harold, or maybe he simply sensed change, the kind he couldn't control. He stood when I walked in. "Mom, can we talk?" I nodded. He swallowed hard. "I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed, but I need you to understand something. I wasn't trying to hurt you." "You did," I said quietly. He flinched like I had slapped him. "Mom, my job is unstable. I've been drowning in debt. I thought, if I sold the house quietly, I could fix things. I could take care of you better. That's not taking care of me," I said. "That's taking control of me." His eyes filled. I didn't know what else to do. "You didn't ask," I wanted to say. "You didn't trust me enough. You didn't trust yourself enough." "Lucas," I said, "your father and I worked hard for this home. We struggled too, but we never chose deception." He sat back down, rubbing his forehead. "I'm sorry, Mom, truly." There it was again, an apology. But I knew apologies were easy. Change was hard. I sat across from him. "Lucas, I met with Harold today." His head jerked up. "Why? To block me out legally?" I did what I needed to do. He closed his eyes. "So that's it? The law comes first now?" "No," I said gently. "My dignity does." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "I'll do better. I swear." "I hope so," I replied softly, because trust is not gone forever, but it is broken. He cried quietly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. It was painful to watch, but sometimes pain is necessary for growth, and in that moment, I wasn't just his mother. I was the woman he needed to face to become better. Later that evening, Brielle arrived. Maybe Lucas had called her, or maybe her heart simply knew something was wrong. She walked straight into the kitchen where I was making tea. "Mom, what happened?" I led her to the dining table where Lucas was already sitting. The tension was thick enough to slice. I took a deep breath and told her everything, slowly, honestly. Brielle's expression shifted from confusion to shock to anger. "Lucas," she shouted, standing up so fast the chair scraped the floor. "How could you do that to Mom?" Lucas buried his face in his hands. "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand," she snapped. "She's Mom, not your ATM, not your burden. She trusted you." I reached for her arm. "Bri, sit down. Fighting won't fix this." Reluctantly, she sat, but her eyes were still burning. Lucas finally whispered, "I'm not the monster you think I am." "Then what are you?" she shot back. "Because this isn't love, Lucas. It's betrayal." I raised my hand gently between them. "Please, listen. We are still a family." For a moment, both of them softened. Just a little. I explained about Harold, the legal protections, the property freeze. Brielle nodded firmly. Lucas's shoulders sank. "Lucas," Brielle said, quieter now, "Mom deserves better than what you did." "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Bri." She looked at him for a long moment before replying, "I hope you mean it, because I'm done watching you hurt her." I took both their hands and held them tight, and for the first time in weeks, even though we were cracked, we weren't completely broken. Over the next few weeks, the house began to feel different, lighter somehow. Brielle visited almost every day, helping with groceries, trimming plants, sitting beside me with coffee and conversation. She didn't hover, but she was present. And presence, I learned, is the purest form of love. Lucas changed too, not overnight, but slowly. He came by often, not to demand, not to pressure, not to argue. He just helped, quietly. He cleaned the yard, fixed the loose porch step, picked up my prescriptions, and sometimes just sat with me in silence. One day, he knocked on my bedroom door. "Mom, can I talk to you?" I nodded. He stepped inside and said softly, "I joined a counseling program for financial stress and impulsive behavior." I looked up at him. For the first time in a long time, I saw sincerity instead of desperation. "That's brave," I said. He smiled weakly. "I'm trying, Mom." And I believed him. A few days later, Harold came over with paperwork. "Maggie," he said, "you are now fully protected. Legally, financially, medically. No one can question your capacity or make decisions without your permission." It wasn't just about money, I told him quietly. It was about protecting my dignity. "And you did," he said, "beautifully." That night, the three of us sat at the dining table. Lucas cleared his throat. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you trust me? Even a little?" The room froze. Brielle looked at me, then at him. I reached for Lucas's hand. "Trust isn't a button you press, Lucas. When it breaks, it shatters. But if someone truly wants to fix it, they can make it stronger than before." His eyes filled with tears. "I want to fix everything, Mom." "Then show me," I whispered. "Not through promises, through actions." He nodded. That night, I sat with Jack's journal again. "Jack," I whispered, running my hand over his handwriting. "I protected our home and our family. I did what you would have wanted. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid, or weak, or alone. I felt steady, like a woman who had weathered a storm and was finally seeing the break in the clouds." Arvind sat outside the emergency ward, staring at the red light above the door, feeling as if the walls of the entire hospital were closing in on him. The echoes of nurses rushing, stretchers moving, machines beeping. Everything felt distant and muffled, as if he were underwater. His mind replayed the road incident again and again, the dark street, the sudden scream, the sound of metal skidding, and the split second in which his daughter Ananya fell because of his shock and hesitation. Though she was safe now and only under observation, the guilt of that moment was cutting through him like a sharpened knife. Maya sat beside him, her shawl wrapped tightly around her arms, her eyes fixed on the floor. She had always been their emotional strength, but tonight even she seemed shaken in a way Arvind had never seen. Rohan stood near the vending machine, pretending to scroll through his phone, but his trembling fingers revealed the truth. He was terrified too. Riva remained silent, sitting in the corner with her face buried in her palms, as if her entire world had stopped moving. When the doctor finally stepped out, all four of them rose at once. The doctor said that Ananya was stable, but she needed complete rest for several days. That single sentence loosened the weight on Arvind's chest, yet the shame of his reflexive fear still burned inside. As the family walked into her room softly, Ananya smiled weakly, lifting her hand in reassurance, even though she was the one lying injured. Arvind couldn't stop his tears. He sat beside her bed and held her hand, apologizing again and again even though she shook her head, telling him she was fine. But Arvind knew she wasn't, and neither was he. Something was wrong in their life, something much deeper than this road scare, and he knew he could no longer pretend everything was under control. That night, after they returned home, Arvind sat alone on the balcony. The city lights flickered distantly, the cold air brushing against his face. This wasn't the life he had promised Maya. This wasn't the father he wanted to be for his children. In the silence of that night, he finally admitted to himself that fear had begun controlling him. Fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of losing the very people he loved. He closed his eyes, clutching the small wooden bead bracelet his late father had once given him. His father's words echoed, "Fear destroys clarity. Clarity creates strength." For the first time in years, Arvind felt a desperate need for clarity. But life doesn't give solutions instantly. The next morning brought another setback. A phone call from his office stating his leave request was rejected, and if he didn't return by tomorrow, his position would be reconsidered. Arvind froze. He needed money, he needed stability, and above all, he needed time for his injured daughter. Everything was colliding at once. He placed his head in his hands, feeling the storm tighten around him again. And yet, beneath all that chaos, he felt something else. A strange calmness that whispered that the worst was not an ending, but the doorway to something he couldn't yet see. The next day began with tension wrapped tightly around the entire household. Arvind left early for the office, determined to protect his job at any cost. He entered the building with a heavy heart, aware that his performance had been shaky for months, and the management had been quietly reviewing several employees for downsizing. When he walked into the conference room, his supervisor, Mr. Talreja, sat with an expression that revealed everything before a single word was spoken. Arvind was told the company was restructuring and his role was being dissolved. No performance warnings, no formal discussions, just a polite sentence that gently pushed him out of the life he had built. His hands shook as he held the termination letter. 12 years of work ending in 12 minutes. He returned home silently, unsure how to tell Maya. As he opened the door, he saw her preparing soup for Ananya, humming softly to keep her own anxiety buried. When Maya noticed his pale expression, her smile vanished instantly. Arvind handed her the envelope without speaking. She read it slowly, her eyes widening, then softening, and then settling into an understanding sadness. But instead of panicking, she stepped closer and held his hand. "We will handle this," she whispered. Her certainty was something Arvind couldn't understand. How could she be calm when everything was falling apart? But Maya had seen more storms than he realized. She had waited through his night shifts, endured months of financial pressure, and carried the emotional burdens he often neglected. Her strength wasn't loud. It was steady and patient. That evening, their son Rohan returned home after college, holding his bag tightly. He hesitated before speaking, glancing nervously toward his parents. He had failed an important university exam. Reva's face went pale when she heard the news, sensing the family sinking deeper. But Maya stepped forward again, placing her hand on Rohan's shoulder. "Listen to me," she said gently. "An exam does not define you. Stand up again." Rohan nodded, tears streaming down his face. Arvind watched quietly, realizing how resilient Maya truly was. She didn't crumble, even when life struck them from every direction. Later that night, while sitting together on the floor around Ananya's bed, the family finally spoke openly. They admitted their fears, their failures, their frustrations, the things they had kept hidden for months. It was the first time they truly saw each other. Arvind felt a shift inside him. Maybe losing his job was not the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something he had ignored for far too long. After everyone fell asleep, Arvind walked into the living room and opened his old notebook, one filled with ideas for a small business he had once dreamed of starting. He had abandoned it years ago in fear of failing. He flipped through the pages now, his fingers trembling. The dream was still there, waiting quietly. As he sat alone under the dim yellow bulb, he felt something stir inside him. A small confidence, fragile yet real. His life was collapsing, yes, but every collapse creates space for rebuilding. He closed the notebook slowly, whispering to himself for the first time in years, Maybe this is not the end. The morning after the family discussion, Arvind woke up with a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of direction. It wasn't confidence, not yet, but a willingness to try. He spent hours revisiting his old business ideas. One plan stood out: a small logistics and delivery coordination unit he once wanted to open in the city outskirts, helping local shopkeepers manage daily pickups and drops. It was simple, scalable, and needed minimal initial investment. The idea reignited something inside him, but he still doubted whether he was capable. For every reason to try, his mind produced 10 reasons to fear. Maya entered the room quietly, noticing the open notebook. She sat beside him and listened as he explained the concept hesitantly, almost apologetically, as if expecting her to reject it. Instead, she nodded. "Start," she said firmly. "We will figure the rest." Her tone held no hesitation, and somehow that filled Arvind with a small spark of courage. But dreams don't unfold smoothly. When Arvind visited the local market to explore transport partnerships, the shopkeepers were hesitant. They asked if he had vehicles, staff, licenses, storage permits, all things he didn't yet have. Every conversation ended with the same polite decline. By afternoon, Arvind was exhausted and sits on a bench outside a tea stall, questioning whether he was forcing something unrealistic. He pulled out his phone out of habit and opened his banking app. The numbers were depressing. With hospital expenses, household needs, and no income, they couldn't survive more than 6 to 7 weeks. Just as panic began rising again, he received a call from Ananya. Her voice was soft but full of warmth. "Papa, don't give up today. I'm proud of you for even trying." Her words hit him deeply, melting the layers of self-doubt he had carried for years. Encouraged, Arvind returned home early. That evening, the family gathered again, this time discussing practical steps. Rohan offered to help with basic digital tasks, like creating a simple website or coordinating orders. Reva said she could manage phone calls and scheduling in her free hours. Even little Ananya insisted she could help from bed by organizing customer lists. Their unity felt like a glowing thread stitching the torn parts of their life back together. But challenges continued. When Arvind visited a local licensing office the next morning, he encountered a corrupt officer who hinted that the approval might take months unless an unofficial fee was paid. Arvind walked out angrily, remembering all the times he had silently tolerated such things. He wasn't willing to bend this time. He filed a formal complaint, even though it meant further delays. Maya supported his decision fully. That night, as he stood near the balcony, hearing distant traffic echoing through the city, Arvind realized something surprising. Despite failure, fear, and chaos, he didn't feel broken anymore. For the first time in years, he felt aligned, not with success, but with truth. He knew the path would be difficult, but he was finally walking it with courage instead of hesitation. Days passed, filled with paperwork, long queues, and frustrating conversations. But Arvind refused to stop. Maya often accompanied him to government offices, helping him maintain patience when situations got tense. During one visit, they encountered a senior officer who noticed the complaint Arvind had filed earlier. After reviewing his documents, the officer decided to fast-track the licensing process without any illegal demands. This small victory lit a spark of hope in Arvind, reminding him that integrity still had a place in the world. With the license approved, Arvind shifted his focus to finding reliable transport partners. He met auto drivers, small pickup van owners, and even a few taxi operators who agreed to collaborate for a trial week. Rohan designed a simple online platform, and Riva created a color-coded scheduling board to track deliveries. Their tiny living room turned into an improvised office, with papers, markers, and notebooks scattered everywhere. It was chaotic, but it was beautiful. A family rebuilding life together. The first day of operations was nerve-wracking. They received only 2 delivery requests. Arvind completed both himself, taking long routes and double-checking every detail, wanting to build a reputation for reliability. By the end of the week, word began spreading slowly. Shopkeepers appreciated punctual service, and drivers appreciated fair payouts. What started as 2 deliveries became 8, then 12, and soon 15 per day. Though the income was still small, it was growing steadily. But life never improves without testing resolve. One evening, a delay caused by a traffic jam led to a customer shouting aggressively over the phone. Arvind apologized politely, but the man escalated the issue, threatening to post negative reviews online. Arvind felt deeply shaken. After the call, he sat silently at the dining table, his shoulders slumped. Maya poured him water and placed her hand on his back. "Bad days don't define a business," she said softly. "Consistency does." Her calmness restored his determination. A few days later, an unexpected problem struck again. A minor accident involving one of the pickup vans. Though no one was injured, the vehicle needed repair, and the driver temporarily stepped back from work. This reduced their transport capacity drastically. As Arvind scrambled to find alternative options, he sensed that the entire operation might collapse just when it had started stabilizing. But fate had different plans. A local temple committee approached Arvind for managing logistics for their monthly community food distribution drive. It was a large project, dozens of delivery points, hundreds of meal packages. Accepting it meant pulling long hours and taking big risks. But rejecting it meant losing the opportunity that could shape the business's future. Arvind accepted. The night before the event, the whole family sat together preparing schedules. Ananya helped from her bed, placing colored stickers on packaging lists. Maya arranged food supply sequences. Rohan finalized route maps, and Riva checked communication logs. In that moment, Arvind looked around the room and felt something powerful. Unity, purpose, and a quiet sense of destiny forming beneath the struggles. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was a lifeline. And it carried the entire family's hope within it. The morning of the temple event was crisp and cool, with golden sunlight filtering through the rooftops. Arvind woke before dawn, his heart beating faster than usual. Today would determine whether his growing business was truly sustainable or just a temporary spark. He quickly prepared, checked his phone, reviewed the routes again, and stepped outside, where the drivers were already gathered. Some smiled reassuringly, others appeared nervous. Arvind gave them simple instructions. Accuracy first, kindness second, speed third. They nodded, sensing his seriousness. As the distribution began, everything ran smoothly for the first hour. The team coordinated through constant calls. Maya handled communication from home. Ananya and Riva updated delivery confirmations, and Rohan monitored the digital platform. Arvind drove from location to location, helping wherever needed. For the first time in months, he felt an almost forgotten emotion. Capability. But mid-afternoon, disaster struck again. One of the vans carrying nearly 60 meal packages broke down on a busy highway. Traffic noise drowned the driver's voice, and panic spread through the line. If those packages didn't reach the temple on time, the entire event could fail. Arvind stood still for a moment, absorbing the chaos. Then he took a deep breath and called every available driver. Within minutes, 2 autos and a taxi arrived. Without hesitation, Arvin climbed into the broken van, hauled the packages out with the driver, and transferred them into the other vehicles. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but his energy didn't falter. He coordinated new routes on the spot, dividing the packages based on distance and road density. His voice was firm, steady, confident. The deliveries resumed. A wave of relief washed over him as updates began flowing again. Delivered. 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 Near evening, when the final confirmation arrived, Arvind parked his vehicle and leaned against its side, overwhelmed with emotion. He had done it, not alone, but with the unwavering strength of his family. Later that night, the temple committee called unexpectedly. The head priest spoke warmly, praising the flawless work despite road issues. He told Arvind that they wanted a long-term partnership. Arvind's eyes welled with tears. Maya, who overheard the call, clasped his hand, her eyes shining. Even Ananya, still recovering, clapped softly with a smile full of pride. The family gathered in the living room, the same cramped room that had become their office, their planning space, and their quiet battlefield. As they sat together, Arvind felt a deep stillness settle in his heart. He thought about the night outside the hospital, the day he lost his job, the despair, the fear, the fights, the delays, and every moment of self-doubt. And now, looking at his family, their tired faces glowing with hope, he realized something profound. Their story wasn't written by luck or misfortune. It was shaped by persistence, unity, honesty, and the courage to rise every time they fell. Arvind looked at his children and said quietly, "We didn't survive this because life became easier. We survived because we became stronger." Maya placed her head on his shoulder, whispering, "Our story is still being written, but now we write it together." And for the first time in a long time, Arvind believed it.